Hello, my name's Marion. Welcome to Marion's World. Every day this year, since January the 1st, I've been going out into my garden and recording some natural data. So I've been painting skies, I've been painting twigs, I've been recording the temperature and the amount of daylight hours. And what I'm recording it on is called a phenology wheel. And so in today's video, I'm going to explain what I've done, why I've done it, and how you can do one for yourself if you want to. I hope you enjoy it. You find me today doing my phenology wheel for the 30th of October. And I've been meaning to do a little tutorial of what I do for this for a while, but I thought I'd leave it till the end of the year so that if you were wanting to do one yourself for next year, it's not that long to sort of think about what you want to do with one yourself. And so I've been out today and got this leaf from my garden. It's a Physocarpus. I've already put the date and the temperature, the temperature and the day length. I'll just bring you in a little bit. So now you can see what I'm doing. I've got the temperature for today, which is at 14 degrees. And I've got the day length, which for the northeast of the UK is 9 hours and 27 minutes. And so that's part of my recording. Just about to paint this leaf, and then I'm going to show you how I'm setting up my wheel and what I did it for and how you can do one too. And then I'll show you how I'm going to set up my wheel for November. This is Physocarpus. It's mainly stayed a bit green. I'll just run some green in here. I'm not a very accomplished watercolourist. That's part of the reason why I was doing this from January, was to try and improve my watercolours. And I actually have seen an improvement, even though this is just a tiny bit of painting every day. I have found that when I look back on the leaves that I did, I think back in March, but I will show you, I can see the difference. And so from that respect, it has definitely worked. So I've been sharing these wheels, their progress, on my Instagram account. And so people have always been asking me, could I not do a tutorial? How did I do them? But actually, I didn't put them on YouTube originally because it was just something I was doing for my own benefit, to try and encourage myself to get out in my garden and also to improve my watercolour because I'm not overly wonderful. At least I can see that I'm not. It's possible. And I've been going out every day to capture either a leaf or a flower or some such thing. And I'll show you how the whole thing is coming along and how I set up the November one. So I just have this one to finish and write in what it is, and then I'll get on with organising my wheel for November. I will write the name. So I have to turn my wheel round, being a lefty. So it's going to go right round here. So this is Physocarpus. And all I'm going to do now is just outline this. The paint's dried, so I can easily go around and just give this an outline. It just makes everything stand out. Still looking at my leaf as I do it. And there I am, done. So here I am ready, set up to make my November wheel. And you don't need much really. I have a ruler, I have a permanent pen. This is a Pilot high-tech point fine liner and it's 0.7 nib. Permanent obviously being waterproof means if I do the lines first, my watercolours aren't going to smudge the ink. A pencil. So if you've got a compass, That means you won't need a protractor and you won't need to work out any of the angles. The compass will do it all for you. A rubber, just because, you know, I'm bound to make a mistake with my pencil. And the main thing really is some good paper. So I'm watercolouring mine. If you were using coloured pencils, I suppose you'd want probably a decent paper more than just printer paper. I'm actually using a 100% cotton watercolour pad, and it is a 12 by 16 inch pad. And I got that because part of the reason I was doing my wheel was so I could practice my watercolours. And it was also a way of trying to engage myself going back out into my garden, because I wasn't doing that. At the beginning, I really didn't think I'd manage to keep it going for a month. And so I didn't make all 12 wheels in advance or anything like that. I just did one and thought, and that was that's January. And I thought, if I can manage to do it for a whole month, then at least I had a chance of completing it for the year. I didn't realise just how much I would enjoy it, how much it did make me re-engage with my garden a bit, and how much my painting has definitely improved, even by just doing that tiny little piece. But regardless of whether you're drawing, painting or what have you, this is how I set it up. I just need to find the centre of my page, which is there, and I put my point of my compass into that middle bit and then stretch it out almost as big as my paper is. Now mine are just not quite the full size, but all I then have to do is sweep my compass round, and there I've got my wheel. So that's the initial bit. So once I had that, I had to decide, well, what did I actually want to record? Now I'm going to take my measurements from my original because they all need to be the same. So I've seen them when I was first thinking about this. I think I first found out about phenology wheels quite a few years ago, and it was a children's thing. I think it was a teacher who was trying to engage children in observing nature. And phenology is all about things like when the first swallow comes, the first time you see your primroses open, or the first time just anything in nature happens, the first time the temperature hits a certain one, or the first time your daylight is different, or the moon phases. And so I did see a lot of wheels that were set up for recording the phases of the moon, and that wasn't really of interest to me. So I decided that all I needed was the date on the outside, and then as big a space as I could to paint my image. And then I decided to record the daily highest temperature, and of course you could record the highest and the lowest, so then overnight and then the midday. But I just record the highest temperature of the day. And then I decided to record how much daylight I was. And so that's mine. So I'm just measuring off my original, just so my wheels are all about the same. There is a bit of variation, but I've already done that one. But it doesn't matter to me that there's a variation. I'm happy with that. I'll just get my inner one. So long as you're putting your point back into the middle, all your circles are going to be concentric, and it is as simple as twirling your compass around. And I think most people maybe have a compass, and if you don't, they're not very expensive to come by, and they're handy for drawing patterns out for patchwork or for all sorts of things. So now you can see I've got my concentric circles. So to start and get the wedge shapes, as long as you have the compass, it's quite easy. The first thing I can do is I can just take my ruler and I can draw a a line through, and it doesn't matter where I draw the line. I don't have to be drawing it perpendicular to the page or down the length. I can just draw it anywhere. It doesn't matter to me because I'm cutting these out. If it matters to you that they're on your page, then make sure that it is lined up somehow with your page. But I cut mine out, so it doesn't actually matter to me much at all. But as long as I'm going through the centre, that line can be anywhere. In fact, I'll do it with the pen so that you can see it. That's probably going to be the easiest. But if you're not confident on doing it with the pen, just do it all in pencil first, which is what I did. And then go over them with the pen afterwards. And I don't go through the middle because that's where I want my pattern to be. But of course, if you do it with pencil, you can rub them out. The next thing to do is to segment this. And if we keep halving the areas, I'll eventually get to 32, which is one for every day of the month, if you've got 31 days, and then a one left over for the month itself to be written in. And so dependent on how many days of your month, if you just segment all of them up to 32, when you come to February, you're going to have a bigger bit left over. You can fill in with something, and then but you've got enough, and it makes them look cohesive if they're all segmented to 32. And so at the minute we've got 2. So to segment this into 32, all I need to do is open up my compass to, wide-ish, and put the point where my first line is crossing one of the inner segments. And I'm just going to draw a very light arc. And I come across to the same spot on the other side, and I'll cross with an arc. And that should mean that when I put my ruler on and I go from the middle through where the crossing points are, I'll have exactly quartered my wheel. Because where those points cross will always be halfway. So I'm just going to go straight in with my pen, just so you can see it. And so now I've got quarters. And all of these crossing marks just rub out. So I now need to go into eighths. So I'm going to just put my compass down a little. I don't have to measure anything. And now I can do the same thing again. I can probably go onto one of the outsides, but I'll stick on this inside one. So exactly where one of the crossing points is going on one of the circles, just close that down a bit. There's one arc, and you can go around and do the next one, and then move to another crossing point, and wherever they cross, that is where that can go to. So you only need to do half of the wheel really, because all of your lines are going to go straight through the middle and out the other side. So I don't need to do these 2 crosses on those 2 pieces, because my line is going to go right through the middle. So again, I'll put it on that side so you can see it. So I've got my ruler lined up with that crossing mark, lined up with the middle, and that exactly makes that. And then I do that with this one. And every time you just make sure you go through where those 2 arcs intersected. It's all just geometry. You don't need a protractor, you don't need to work out the angles. Now you can definitely carry on making your marks from the inner circle all the time. Just make sure you've got just over halfway with your compass, and you can sweep around that half circle, move to the next line along, come in with another arc and move it across. You just work round until you've got half of the circle done. I think that's it. and then in with your pencil or your pen to take those marks through the middle. I'll just narrow my compass down again. If you find that you've made your mark and then you go to the next one and you're not crossing over, just narrow or just widen your compass until you do get the crossing marks. Don't put them on with much pressure, you only just need to be able to see them and then rub them out. So that means I've got all of my segments done. I can rub out all of the little pencil marks there. Just do them really light so they'll come off easily. And then the next thing I do is just freehand go around over the top of my drawn circles. And if you're worried about drawing a circle by a freehand like this, the best advice I can give you for drawing these circles, and don't worry if they're a bit wobbly, it's all I'm going to make it, it's hand drawn, it doesn't have to be perfect, it's not being printed with a printer, is if you're worried about it, have just a practice. Just anchor your hand, obviously I'm left-handed, anchor your hand down and just give some movements with your hand and you'll find that you're describing an arc just quite naturally as your hand goes round. And once you've had a little bit of a practice, don't go too far back, just start at wherever your hand naturally wants to go, and you'll find that you can follow the line you've drawn pretty decently, even though there might be some wobbles in. And as soon as you get to where you think it's a struggle, you just stop and go and do the outer arc. And you might not get as far, or you might get further. I'm not getting as far. And turn your whole thing round. Get your hand anchored. Practice. You're going to come off that piece, and then all of a sudden you'll find you will just be able to follow that good enough. And as I say, it doesn't matter that it's a wobbly line. You're making something hand done. It doesn't have to look like it's come from a machine. So that's the basic thing is now drawn out. The next thing I do is I usually just play around with making a bit of a pattern in the middle. Simplest way to do it is just to put your compass on the point and get the radius of your circle and then move the point to the outside edge. And you can just move around the circle making little arcs and moving your point round, and you'll eventually get little petal shapes, which is exactly how January's was filled in. And you can just go around and then you can just embellish from there. There are lots of sorts of mandala shapes you can see online, so there's scope for all sorts of circular patterns. Pretty soon you've got a bunny design that you can paint up, and then the last thing to do is put the numbers in, ready to get yourself started off and the month. And so for me, I can do it anywhere I can start. I can start in any segment at all because I'm cutting my wheel out, but obviously if you're doing it in a little book that's going to turn and you're not cutting it out, you're going to need to decide where your month segment's going to be and then start your numbers from there. And I think the other thing is just don't worry about putting them in. I just use my normal handwriting and I just sort of draw the number and then go around again with another line to thicken it up and make it something I can fill some colour into. But people worry about their handwriting sometimes, but really it's just drawing some numbers. Although I'm sure you can get stickers and things like that, if you want to use some sort of a sticker or print them out or something like that. But I really do think that your normal handwriting is probably good enough. As I go around, I always have to try and think, because on one of the months I made a mistake on the numbers. I must have got disturbed halfway through, came back to finish it off, and I missed a whole number out. And I was already halfway through painting it in when I realised the mistake. So I didn't want to have to do the wheel again. And so I sort of scraped away at the paper until I got it that I could renumber. I'll show you that, because it hasn't really bothered me that I made the mistake. It's just all about doing it. Thing is, I think the reason sometimes I miss the number, or I have to double check, is because being a lefty, my hand's covering it up as I go around, and then I think, what number am I up to? And I have to double check it. My twos are always all over the place. Now, of course, we're nearly up to the 1st, and I still haven't actually got a theme for November yet, because I've sort of come to the end of the autumn leaves, and December, I think, is going to have the sky again, because I thought that would be a nice beginning and an end. November, I've got my thinking cap on, and I'm not quite sure yet what the theme will be, but I'll have to think of it soon. So the last thing is to actually put in the name of the month, and what I normally do is I do practice it first just in pencil, just to make sure that I get it all in nicely. And so I just carefully write it in, just giving myself enough room that it doesn't look weird. I can get that in, and then once I know that I've got it filling up the space as much as I like, I go back in with my pen and just sort of in my normal sort of writing, I put the letters in, and I do a double line because I like the backgrounds to be painted in. Anyway, that's it. I'm set up for November now. The one that I ended up numbering incorrectly and had to go around it was indeed May, and so I'd gone all the way round, and I got up to about here when I realised that I'd gone from 19 to 21, and then obviously every number, all the twos were fine, but I had to turn the 1 into a 0 and a 0 and the number 2 into a 1. That was really difficult. I ended up just scraping at the paper until I got the top layer off and then put it on again. So all of those second numbers have all been altered to get them in. That's another one. You can see the 8 had to go to a 7. So there's always ways and means. If I hadn't told you, you might not have realised, but you know, it's what it is. The one that stands out to me is the 21. It was the worst one to actually alter. But anyway, I'm set up, ready to go. So in January, I sort of kept thinking, well, there's nothing in my garden for me to go and look at. So I just thought, well, I'll paint the sky. And I thought it was going to be very boring, because I thought there was not going to be any difference. But in the end, I really enjoyed coming up with a way of painting. And you can see that even in January, my painting from the 1st here was sort of actually painting the colours in. rather than let the colours do themselves. And then I sort of got a bit better. And this little phase here I call my Simpsons sky phase, because I think it was looking like a bit like this, the Simpsons. And it was just sort of that, I was still drawing things, I think, instead of letting the watercolour do its thing. And originally I didn't have any of these words in, where I've got partly sunny, cloudy, damp and drizzly. But as I worked my way round, I felt that I needed to put something. And so I started to put in what the skies were. And obviously I got my 7 degrees, 7 hours 20, and then comes right the way around. And by the end of the month I was on, well, I hadn't warmed up much, 8 degrees, but 8 hours 43. And so I started to record the average temperature and the amount of daylight we'd either gained or lost throughout the year. So that was January. So that meant I had to come up with a theme for February. I decided it was winter twigs. And so February was twigs. And this is when I started to paint in the numbers as well, and I went back and did January's with the pale blues. And so this was mainly winter twigs, excepting for the snowdrop crept in, because I thought it might have been over by the time March came, where I was going to do flowers. And this is where I started to do the outlines. I had the wheel half done and thought there was not really much impact with them, so I started to paint them in and then go around with my black pen. And so it just evolved. March, that was obvious one, that was spring flowers, and I caught the last of the snowdrops in March the 1st, and it was mainly purples and blue, and that's what I've got on my background for March. And it did help me to definitely go out every day and look for something. I didn't pile up the photographs. I purposely made sure that every single day I went out to look for the next thing. April was really difficult, and so this one I just decided to label it tiny things. And so it came from like the spores on lichen and moss and a tiny spider, raindrops, little seedlings in a paving crevice, a little moss on a pebble, just little things that I could fit in. That's the only one that's sort of not got a theme of all the same things. So it was obvious to do leaves in May, and I'm going to put this to one side because I'll show you how I know, this is how I know that my painting improved. So even though it was just a tiny bit of painting, it's been worth it to me because I can see the improvement of just that tiny little bit every day. And the other thing is that virtually every single thing is from my garden. So leaves, and of course what else could June be but summer flowers. That's why June has a very vibrant background. And I matched the colour of the number to whatever the flower was that I did. And sometimes I've got backgrounds on them, and sometimes I haven't. Just whatever pleases me at the time. I like the foxglove on here. So July left me again. It was the summer flowers had been done. Couldn't start autumn flowers yet, and it was like, what can the theme be? So I decided July I would go for one rose that's just outside my back door, and it's a yellow one, the one I planted for Michael, and there was some just coming into bud, and so I thought if I follow the bud through the month, maybe it would change enough every day for me to see the change, and I was hoping to get a rose hip at the end of it. However, it was the wettest, coolest month, and it was very wet, and so my poor rose never actually made a hip. It went from the bud, and I just tried to sort of put it in there every day as it opened. It's got raindrops on it, and then just as it got open, it just started to go over because it started to rot because there'd been so much rain. And it was like, oh, shall I just carry on? I thought, no, I've got to carry on with this same rose. That's the whole point. I'm following it through. And so it just went from barely open to starting to go. And I had lots and lots of it actually dying and just going brown, and I never ever got to a hip. It never got fertilised properly. And so it was what to put, because I couldn't just put rose on every single one like I'd been putting all the names on, like that. You know, iris, foxglove, honeysuckle. So my friend said, well, why don't you just put rose in different languages? And so I thought, oh God, that's such a good idea. And so I started off with Latin, English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, and then as I started looking further afield, French and Dutch and what have you, a lot of the languages was just very, almost the same as just rose. I got Rosa, Rose, Rose, Roisin, Rose. And so I thought, well, I've got to look at different languages and even different alphabets. And so I started to look at totally different ones, and especially if they had a different way of writing. And I really enjoyed looking at them and putting them on. I've got Thai, Serbian, Ukrainian, Persian. That was an interesting one to do. And I had one space left where I hadn't had, the rose had just gone by then, there was nothing else. And Wendy came up with the idea of putting sign language in. And so I filled up my last day, day 31, with trying my best to draw the sign for sign language, which I just found online. August, autumn flowers, or the late summer flowers. That was a lovely one to do. September, I decided to choose seed heads, berries and fruits. So that agapanthus was lovely, very blue, and blackberries. And tomatoes from the greenhouse. Dock leaves, foxglove. Some of them were quite challenging to paint. And so that was September, which comes up to October, which I'm still on with, which is autumn leaves. I'll show you the difference. Or was I going to keep the other one out? So if you look back to May at them, and then I compare them, I can definitely see an improvement. And that's just showing that if you practice something all the time, even though you might not see the improvement, you do improve. And that's the same with painting, as in stitching. You improve over time just by the act of keeping on doing it. And so that's been a good lesson for me that I'm passing on to you. You just keep going. Never think that it's not good enough, because you can only get better and you just improve. And the reason I came up with just a part of it was because if I'd done just a little picture of an oak tree or a leaf, they wouldn't have been big enough. And so I was just like, well, just pretend it's down a microscope. And so that's how that ended up. I'm having a practice now with some black card, but I'll show you that on another video, where I can put the black card on and hinge it into a book. And I've got ideas for the back. But for now, that's how you set up your wheel. And I hope if you're wanting to do one, I hope you've gained enough information there that you can go ahead and do one yourself if that's what you're wanting to do. So there they all are, looking super colourful. And I'm absolutely over the moon with my own self that I carried on for the whole year. So I really hope you found that helpful, and I hope it's inspired you to have a go at just nature journaling in quite a small scale. It hasn't really taken up a lot of time each day. It's just a matter of recording, well for me, recording the temperature and the day length, both of which are, well for the temperature I just use my normal app on my phone that does the weather, and for the day length there is a really good website, an app called Time and Date, and you can put your location in and it will give you things like the sunrise, the sunset, the day length, the phases of the moon, all sorts of things like that. And it's just a free app on your phone, and I have used that the whole year to find out the length of daylight that I have here in the northeast of England. And what was really surprising is how much difference there was between where I live up here and down in London. And so I think obviously you know that the further north you go, the day length is different, or the further south you go and vice versa. But it was a surprise to me how much of a difference it made just being those maybe 300 miles further north. So it's been a very interesting experience, and one I would definitely recommend. Make yourself a lovely wheel, and you could collage something in the little wedges. You have to sort of be creative because it's only a little piece, but I feel that the restriction of having just that little wedge shape to fill in made me be extra creative with the way I painted my pieces in, and it really did encourage me out into my garden, which I hadn't been doing. I've fallen by the wayside a little bit now, but it definitely has helped, and I have loved every single moment of recording that and painting it. And I'm going to be turning it into a book, but of course I can't finish it off until after the 31st of December. So it's an ongoing thing, so probably you'll get another video in January sometime when I'm actually finishing the whole thing off. So thanks again for watching, and thank you for all your support. I'm sure you're going to like the look of it, but I really hope that you're inspired to do something similar for yourself next year. You won't regret it. If you can get through January, I think then you're sort of set for the year. Bye everyone, and thank you so much.